So I run a 6-figure illustration business here in the northeast of England where I work alongside my husband and my brother-in-law. Here we manufacture, create and sell really cute illustrations, stationery, homeware and so much more. And I actually started my business in my bedroom back in 2015 and I have been completely self-sufficient since 2019, and my business looks dramatically different now to what it did back in 2015. And when I ask you guys questions over on Instagram and here on YouTube, one of the repeat questions was actually how I started my small business. So today I am going to deep dive and really bring you guys along right from the very start in 2015 to finally becoming a self-sufficient limited company back in 2019. I have actually been documenting my full journey here on this YouTube channel. So although you could go back and watch the vlogs right from the very beginning, from when I started in my bedroom, I realised that really it would be easier to get the full story condensed down in one video so you don't have to go through all those vlogs. But if you're interested after watching this video of starting from the very beginning, my old cringy videos are still on my channel. So let's go back to the very beginning, which I remember very distinctly being October of 2015. I had got a degree in graphic design. With me being in the local area, I realised there wasn't that many graphic design jobs available to me, and at the time I worked part-time in retail. I'd been working at a supermarket called Morrison's since the age of 16. After I left uni, I felt completely lost and kind of deflated, and I was like, what is next? I was really kind of worried and a little bit down, to be honest, because I had no idea what to do next. I knew I wanted to do something creative, but I just didn't know what that entailed. And I remember applying for so many different jobs, even jobs at like a bank. So I was just applying for any full-time position so I could try and support myself on a full-time wage, all the while I was picking up extra shifts at supermarket. I finally managed to get a full-time job at a local company with my friend, and it was a window firm. And I remember I was kind of doing a little bit of everything. I was doing a bit of the graphic design, I would do their social media marketing and their Facebook pages, and I would also be a receptionist answering phone calls, but it wasn't like a permanent position at the time. I also kept my part-time job, and then I actually ended up getting another part-time job on top of that. I still felt really unfulfilled, and I felt creatively unfulfilled, and I just knew it wasn't what I was meant to be doing. And I remember describing this feeling to my friends as like a white box that was missing out of me. There was like this white void is how I described the metaphor, and I didn't know what it was that needed filling. Lo and behold, years down the line I realised that was actually my creativity and doing Katnipp. So I was juggling these jobs, and finally I got offered a full-time position, and I got to see how he ran a business, which was really invaluable. And there's a lot of like self-help books and stuff that I read that do say if you want to start a business, try and go to a startup and see how they run, or a small business and see how they run. Although I'd worked in retail for like 7 odd years prior to that, I already knew the importance and got training on customer service. I got to see how they would market. So they use vans as marketing, they use more traditional media as well, like print marketing. So I really learned a lot of lessons from there. But whilst I was at this full-time job, I remember just still feeling this empty white box, and I remember googling quit your day job or Etsy quit your day job. And I always remember I used to get 2 15-minute breaks and a half an hour break in the middle of the day, and during the half an hour breaks I would read the Etsy quit your day job articles where they would tell inspirational stories of small business owners, crafters, hobbyists who had managed to grow business to eventually quit their day jobs and then go full-time in their business. And I remember reading these thinking, oh my gosh, imagine creating your own living and selling your own products and getting to be creative and experiment and actually sustaining yourself off that. And I remember being so inspired by these, and like a light bulb went off in my head. It just got the cogs really turning. And I think these first steps of first believing it was possible was the actual start to me making my own small business. I also remember at the time one of my friends who actually owns a graphic design company called Loom Cub Studio. She ran a vintage clothes business at the time through ASOS Marketplace, and probably one of the first like business owners I knew as a friend who was kind of a solopreneur making her own money. And I actually experimented with this myself, and I opened a small business called Feathers and Cotton, just as like an experimentational thing. And I remember I would go to charity shops and vintage shops, source really cute items. I would get my friends or my sister and model them, and then I would sell them. So that was actually my first ever experience with e-commerce selling. Cut out my own little greeting cards on like a really crappy printer, and I remember just enjoying the packaging experience and sending that to the customer. And then I was also working full time as well, but it gave me an idea of e-commerce selling and how to have that good e-commerce interaction. And then alongside reading articles from Etsy Quit Your Day Job, I realised, well, hang on, why don't I use the skills that I learned as a graphic designer and an illustrator and start selling something that I can already do? And that was commissions. So I remember way back posting an image of my friend's little girl, reached out to me and she was like, you should sell these. And it wasn't until about a year or two later that this thought came back into my mind, because the Etsy Quit Your Day Job had triggered research phase. Every time I was on my break at work, I would research different Etsy shops, what was selling, what could I actually do that required no money up front. I was only on minimum wage with my full-time job at the time, and that was just enough to get me by with my bills. And then I realised I could actually open custom commissions, and there was already Etsy sellers on there selling like wedding custom commissions, custom portraits. So in 2015 I opened my first Facebook page. I picked a business name which ended up being Katnipp. I wanted to make sure that the domain was free, and I remember registering for Katnipp.com even before I knew what items I was going to sell. And very luckily to this day I'm still called Katnipp.com. That was kind of the start of Katnipp. And I illustrated some of my friends' little girls and stuff to use as an example commission, and then I would just share it all over Facebook. And I remember I got my first ever custom commission sale, and how I sold it was I sold a print, but I had no printer. Like, I literally had no printer. I made my first sale, which was like a friend of a friend of a friend on Facebook, so I still had my full-time job and part-time job as I was doing this, as I was setting up Katnipp. Actually, I think I still had my full-time and 2 part-time jobs at one time whilst I was starting Katnipp, but the 2 part-time jobs didn't last. So I worked at New Look, a clothing store. I didn't last very long there because I was getting burnt out from working full-time and part-time at Morrison's. But this is why I was still working in the supermarket and full-time at Martin Windows. I remember making my first ever commission, no printer, went out with the money. I think I made £35. I couldn't actually believe it, because I was like, £35 for one illustration, which at the time was a lot of money for me because I was working in a supermarket which barely paid me that for the full day shift, and it was a hard physical labour shift as well. And I went out with that £35. I remember buying this old really cheap Epson printer. I googled good printers for fine art prints and Epson came up. It literally took so long to print one picture on like nice paper, and I remember putting my commissions for 2 to 3 weeks was always like my standard commission length. And I remember not even knowing what paper I wanted to print on. But from opening Feathers and Cotton, I had this drawer where I literally had this hammered card and paper in the drawer, and I remember printing off my first commission. I shipped it, I wrapped it in tissue, I made a little thank you card and cut it out manually and put that in and printed it on the printer, and that was my first ever commission. Between 2015 to 2017 I kept working on my commissions and sharing them, and I actually only started in my bedroom with a little bamboo graphics tablet, and that's the only thing that I had. This bamboo graphics tablet cost me about £80, and then I had a part-time job on an evening, so I'd come in, and I always remember this, I don't know why I remember it so distinctly, try and push me through my work of doing the commissions and still managing to hold a full-time job and a part-time job. I would try and make my environment really nice and cozy so it didn't feel like work, because I still had some customers and commissions to get through. And what I would do is I would come home from Morrison's from a really late shift, and I would put on I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here on my Mac, and I'd sit there and I'd illustrate until about 11 p.m. at night. So I finished my shift at night at about 9 p.m. so I was usually at my full-time job from 8 till 5. The boss let me go home half an hour early so I could get to my second part-time job, which I did 2 times a week, and then on a Sunday, and then I would go and do my part-time job. And then when I came back at 9 p.m. at night after my part-time job, I would have my tea, and then I'd put I'm a Celeb on and I'd illustrate my commissions. I'd send the sketch off to one person and do my illustrations on an evening. Everything I made through my commissions and my portraits, I would reinvest back into Katnipp. I did not spend a penny of that money. That money that I made through my commissions wasn't for me to spend, it was to reinvest back in to experimenting with products. Buying a heat press, I ended up buying this really cheap mug press. So from the time of 2015 of opening to 2018, I then reinvest every single penny I had back into Katnipp. So anything I made on Katnipp through commissions or otherwise like craft markets, I also experimented with them. Some were a flop. I would go to craft markets and I'd experiment with hand making products because I'd reinvest the money I made from my commissions to experiment with physical products. I also looked and researched what was selling on Etsy, and then once the full-time job became a proper contract, I then quit my part-time job at a supermarket because I knew I was secure in my full-time job. But all the meantime I always worked on Katnipp after my full-time job, but I knew it wasn't sustainable to do a full-time job, a part-time job and Katnipp all at once. I was able to quit my part-time job, focus on my full-time job and focus on Katnipp on the evenings when I finished, and weekends would be dedicated to Katnipp as well. And it was only really 2017 that I was actually making really any money at all. I was only really marketing on Facebook to start with. I used to be part of these craft and connect like sites. I used to do these things where I would comment on their crafting page and then they would comment on mine to try and boost it on Facebook. And Facebook is actually how I started, just with friends and family, then these crafting groups. And then I realised that actually this audience actually isn't quite the right fit for Katnipp and where I want to take Katnipp. However, I hadn't developed my style or my characters or anything like that at this point. It was just purely experimentation and trying different products, different styles, different techniques. I also began watching other artists here on YouTube, and I started my own YouTube channel back in 2017. So 2017 is when I started the YouTube channel. I kind of posted in dribs and drabs, but I also started to slowly move away from Facebook when I realised that the audience wasn't quite the right fit, and I started to experiment with Instagram. I was really late to the Instagram game. There was already very established artists on there, but I looked up to them and I followed them, and I would take part in daily drawing challenges, Inktober's, and I also looked up to many artists here on YouTube doing vlogs, similar vlogs, or full-time artists who did this as a career, and I watched what they did, what worked, what I personally liked about their style, why I was drawn to them, why I wanted to support them. I started implementing what I was learning from them and seeing from them into my own vlogs, into my own work. And I also googled and went on Skillshare classes, I went on YouTube classes, and I searched how to market my small business on Instagram, how to market my small business on YouTube, and I would go from there. And I slowly started building this stuff out and also experimenting with different social media platforms to see what worked best with me. Now I have to say, right from the get-go, I've always loved YouTube the most. I've always wanted a YouTube channel. In fact, I did my first ever YouTube video about 2013, 2014, and it went nowhere. It literally went nowhere. I filmed it on a grainy iMac on a webcam, and it was so cringe. I don't even think I would still have the video, and it never went anywhere. And I used to consume a lot of YouTube videos anyway. I found that actually the social media platform that I actually think works for me and that I enjoy the most is actually YouTube, and also Instagram at the time as well. It's kind of lost its way for me a little bit now, but at the time there was so much creativity going on there. I got to see all these artists that I was super inspired by. We got to take part in daily drawing challenges, and I feel like at the minute that's not really happening anymore. I feel like Instagram and YouTube really felt like my platforms where I could market my business. And obviously as I learned to grow my YouTube channel and as I learned to grow my Instagram, I then attracted more eyes on Katnipp, on my commissions and on my products. So then organically I started making more sales, and I also started researching SEO and my Etsy shop. First I just used to send PayPal invoices as commissions, And then I opened an Etsy store where I would direct my customers to buy through Etsy as like a third-party selling platform, because not everyone had PayPal at the time and did invoicing and stuff like that. So then I started researching how to organically get found on Etsy through people who didn't find me through social media, through the use of tools like SEO, search engine optimization, and how I could get found on there. And slowly over time, my sales started growing. And then it got to a point in 2018, almost 2.5, 3 years after first starting my business, where I decided to take the plunge and drop down to a part-time position at my full-time job, which at the time was an absolute dream to me. Now, dropping down to part-time meant that I could still pay the bills without worrying too much, but then it freed up this extra 2 days to really dive deep into Katnipp and really try and expand and develop my style even more and dedicate a lot more time. So I would work Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday at my now part-time job, and Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, 4 days was dedicated to Katnipp. And it was amazing. Like, I couldn't believe it. I was now working more time in my own business than I was on someone else's. And this to me was so exciting. And I remember thinking, oh my goodness, I can't believe this is happening. And I remember first approaching my boss and being so scared about this and thinking, is this going to work? If not, I can just always ask if I can go back full time. And I just remember being so scared to actually ask if I could drop down to part time. I then kept building Katnipp, and obviously because I had more time to dedicate to it, I felt like my style developed a lot quicker, and I also was growing my audience a lot more, noticing more sales. The research on the SEO from Etsy was starting to build up, and I was thinking, oh my goodness, I'm actually getting like organic sales now. This is so exciting. And I always kept evaluating my products and adjusting them and seeing what worked, and then doing more of what worked. That was also in terms of my social media content. Then came 2018. So I've been at this for 2.5, 3 years now. 2018 is when I invested in my first ever studio. And I remember being so excited because then not only did I go in 2017, I dropped down to a part-time position at my job. In 2018, I decided to get a studio, which was £50 a week, which was a big risk at the time for me because £50 a week was a lot of money. That was £200 a month. Was I going to be able to afford it? I do not know. But I even approached my boss and said, I'm buying a studio, and actually it was right round the corner from my full-time job. I could literally walk to the studio. It was on the same industrial estate. Can I go freelance? I was starting to become more of a marketer in the business. I was doing their photography, I was doing their social media posts, and I also got offered another job from another window firm, and then another window firm. So it was actually 3 window firms at one time that I worked for, because they'd seen me working with this window company and wanted to work with me as well. Basically like a social media VA now, virtual assistant, which wasn't really a thing that I knew about at the time, but I basically became a freelance VA for the window firm. But I would go out and actually take photographs still of their installations. It's nice to fall back on having these 2 freelance jobs. All the while I was building up my own personal Katnipp growth, but like I say, still didn't touch any of my Katnipp income. Everything still up until this point was always reinvested back into Katnipp, getting better products, investing in my first pins, and investing in my first like items that got shipped in, my stationery items. Because before then I was investing into equipment like heat presses, learning how to sublimate, because making to order items was much more affordable and meant I could experiment much more than if I bought in items in bulk and I didn't know how to sell and they were sat on my shelves. I couldn't afford to do that at the time. So the only viable option was to do made to order products where I could experiment to see what worked and what didn't work. And slowly over time I realised what did and didn't work, and then produced more of them. And then in 2018 I invested in my first point and shoot camera. So I used to have a DSLR camera I would film on the channel, but most of all it was filmed on like my really old iPhone 7. And then through a stroke stroke of luck and moving into the studio and documenting my studio move, my first ever one, I did Studio Vlog 001, and I remember it was the first ever studio vlog on this channel, and it kind of went like almost semi-viral. It got picked for this thing called Creator on the Rise. I'd already done several videos on my YouTube channel before then, but this studio vlog is really what boosted my organic reach and marketing, because it got so many different eyes on my items and got people aware of what Katnipp was and what we did here at Katnipp. Oh, thanks for my cup of tea, Dean. Catherine's coffee mug with Bumblebutt on it. Anyway, yeah, that really boosted it. And I remember I was still working freelance at this point. I actually got my sister in to help me fulfill the orders because I couldn't keep up with this influx of orders. But I couldn't offer like a full part-time position because I was still working freelance for someone else. And then I kept consistently posting here on YouTube, experimenting with different videos and also growing my Instagram posts, and it kind of had this compounding snowballing effect, and everything I'd learned from 2015 to 2018 started to like build up, and this audience started to build up of this organic reach. So I got my first studio in 2018, and by the end of 2018 we moved into a second studio. So I went from paying £50 a week, and I managed to ask the landlord if I could have another studio, and it was just down the corridor, literally one door to the next, and I asked if he would do like a 2 studio deal, and it was £80 a week. So I actually thought that was incredibly good value for money. Looking back at the time, that was really scary because it was a lot of money and I didn't know if this was going to work or anything, but it was just all experimentation and taking risks. And I think taking these risks really helped me grow as a business owner, because I realized like if I invest back into it, it can pay off in the end. And from 2018 to 2019, we'd seen a substantial growth on the YouTube channel. I was consistently posting, and I decided to keep posting consistently. My Instagram was also growing, and I finally quit my full-time job in 2019, and I decided to go from a sole trader to a limited company in 2019, which is when Katnipp Studios Limited was officially born. This step was really scary for me, and I remember just thinking, oh my gosh, I had huge imposter syndrome at the time, and I was like, can I really do this? But we'd had a year and a bit of consistent sales, of consistent growth here on YouTube, of ad revenue. I'd also opened a Patreon page and built up different streams of revenue to be able to eventually quit. So I wasn't just now relying on organic sales, I also managed to get multiple streams of revenue from YouTube, Patreon as well, and Patreon paid my wage. Thank you so much to my beautiful Patreons. That still is the case to this day. I use Patreon as my income for my wage, and I pay myself like a minimum wage, and then any organic sales that I would make through Katnipp, even now, I reinvest back into Katnipp. And in 2019 I actually had Emily come on board part-time, and then also my brother-in-law Mike, who still is with us to this day, also came on board as well, because we've seen a really big boom in the YouTube channel. And I remember, I've actually got the figures here. Now I will say we are based in the northeast of England, which is much more affordable than say London, but from the tax year of 2019 to 2020 tax year, the beginning of 2020, we made a grand total of £54,591. That was all the money coming in at Katnipp. Now a little bit of it from the very beginning would have been from my freelance jobs, but then we left because I wanted multiple streams of revenue, and I'd learnt the best way to be sustainable was to have multiple streams of revenue. I felt more confident that if one fell through, which eventually does happen, then I still had other ones to fall back on to be able to pay my bills. So yeah, the money in that tax year was 54,000, but the take home pay that I actually took home as a wage was £33,000. So that is the very origins of Katnipp and how I started from 2015 to 2019. Can't believe I've managed to survive 5 years through my own sources of income, but I definitely think having those multiple revenue streams has been very helpful, and that is how I did it. And if you want to watch the full journey and actually break down and see every single step of the journey, you can go all the way back on this channel and watch it from day one. They're really cringy, those videos, so be warned. But I hope you enjoyed this storytelling in how we became a limited company. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments below, because I would really love to do more of these videos where I deep dive with you guys into small business, into illustration, into building a brand. And there will be more videos to come where I do more informational videos like this, because I feel like I used to do a lot of these back in the day and I've just been pumping out studio vlogs and behind the scenes. Please be sure to stick around and subscribe, and I also post updates and studio vlogs where I take you along. I still feel like I'm at the very beginning of the journey, and I feel like we're just getting started, and I'm really excited. I'm in this for the long haul, so I'm so excited to see where we're going to go with this business. I can't wait to see what the future has in store, so I hope you enjoy following along on the journey, and I'll see you all very freaking soon. Alright then, thanks so much for watching. I love you. Goodbye.